What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Maye. So today I'm joined by my former high school baseball teammate, Brendan Murray, his second time on the podcast, the sports maestro, Brendan Murray. It's a pleasure having you on today. Thank you for your time. How you doing today, Brendan?
I'm doing good. How about you, my friend?
Doing well, dude. It was great seeing you this weekend at the BC football game against Clemson. Wasn't obviously the best outcome, but it was great seeing you and being able to catch up and obviously meeting your buddy James. That was a pleasure. Hopefully you had fun at the game despite the loss.
Yes, sir.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. It was great having you there, and I appreciate your time today. Happy to hear all as well. So today we'll talk everything Boston, just like we did last time. We touched on the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics, the Red Sox. We'll do the same thing today. Well, let's start off with the Bruins, though, right? And this is a team that people had low expectations for, right, heading into the year. I know we're only 4 games in, so no one's, clinched the playoffs yet. But they're 3-1. Good start to the year. Had a tough loss yesterday to Tampa Bay. They were down 3-0. Ended up battling back and lost that game 4-3. Had a lot of chances, especially in the last minute. Let's talk about that team, though. What have you seen from the Bruins so far, whether it's a certain player, a certain, line that's really working well? What have you seen with this team?
I think they'll definitely be a surprise to a lot of teams. I think coming into the year, obviously they have a lot of young players. You don't really know what's going to happen because obviously trading a lot of our key pieces at the last deadline. We had Brandon Carlo gone, Brad Marchand, who had obviously been here for 15 years or so. And, you got a new coach now, and I think it's just a big culture change, to say the least, where I think that can really help a team start moving forward. And, you have your key goalie, and Jeremy Swayman, who looks like, obviously he's only played 2 games so far, but looks like he's going to have definitely a much better year than last year, and getting off to a fresh start and not having to deal with the whole contract situation that he did last year, it's definitely going to be a big boost.
Yeah, I think you said it best there with Swayman, hopefully having a bounce-back year. And last year was tough, right, because he didn't really participate in the summer workouts and obviously training camps well because he was getting the contract situated, right around the beginning of the preseason last year. So it was difficult for him to get back into shape and, obviously seeing live pucks. This year he's been great, 2-0 record. Like you said, he's been awesome, .966 save percentage, 1 goal against average as well. He's been great. And then even Korpisalo's been pretty decent. He's had 3.5 goals against. He had a better game, a couple games ago than he did yesterday because he was in net yesterday as well. But he had a better game one for him than he did, in his second game of the year. But at the end of the day, that's how it's going to go when you're a backup goalie, especially. You're going to have some good nights and some bad nights. One guy that has stood out so far, which he's kind of the main player on the team, is David Pastrnak, right? He obviously showed up yesterday in that last minute. I don't know if you saw, you probably did. That great save he had in the net. Should have probably got by him and made a great save, a great kick save, and then even lit up Kucherov going down, back down that end again, a few seconds later. What have you seen from him this season? I know he obviously has to be that lead goal scorer for this team.
Yeah, I think we saw it first game where it's just like, I was saying to my dad when we were watching, it's like, obviously that first shot when he scored was great, but then on that power play, what really stood out to me was that pass to Lindholm where he went backhand, where a few years ago you probably don't really see him make that pass, where I think now he's become that leader where he has to start being the distributor as well as the best goal scorer.
Definitely, for sure. And that's what the Bruins kind of need. They need a setup guy, too. And even though he won't necessarily be the setup guy, every time because he's going to be that guy that's going to be the one taking the shot, it's nice to have somebody that can at least pass as well and shoot. That's what they had for years with Bergeron, right? He was great at everything. Bergeron did everything well on the ice. You don't really have that now without him. You don't really have a setup guy with obviously, Krejci being retired and gone now for a couple of years. So it's nice to see Pastrnak add that to his game a little bit. I think once James Higgins leaves BC, who knows, that's another year or so, but once he leaves BC, I think the Bruins have a nice setup guy, at least for the future, to try to develop. I know you're excited with him as a prospect.
Definitely, and I was thinking about that because I know, obviously, in the past years, we haven't really been the best drafting team, which Don Sweeney, obviously, it's like, that's kind of one of the things everybody critiques him on, is like, he doesn't get good draft picks, but I think James Higgins is definitely a good start, and I am really liking Fraser Minton, who we got in the Brandon Carlo trade last year from the Maple Leafs, and so far he's looked very good. And if we get James Higgins and Fraser Minton for the next 10 years or so, hopefully that can be some noise in Boston.
100%. Yeah, Minton's looked pretty good. I know he's on the younger side as well, and obviously had a nice goal already to begin the season. So hopefully he continues to develop. And when I looked at the Bruins lineup yesterday, right, and looked at their lines, they are lacking, that they had more talent in years past. Obviously, like you already mentioned, Marchand got traded, Carlo got traded, Bergeron and Krejci, they were here 2 or 3 years ago. Now they're gone. The lineup isn't as talented as they were in years past, but considering where they are right now, 3-1 through the first 4 games, and Swayman's looking really good so far, and those 2 outings he's had. If they could just have a really good year from him, and then have some timely goals from, obviously Pastrnak will be that leading goal scorer, but timely goals from Geeky. Maybe Zacha adds some more goals this year. I know he's had 4 assists and he's got 5 points to begin the year, but they need some more goal scoring. I think that's what this team lacks. Elias Lindholm, right? 2 goals to begin the year, 2 assists. What do you expect from him? You think he could be that secondary scorer for the Bruins? The main guy's going to be Pastrnak, but do you think he could be that second guy?
I think you read my mind. That's exactly the next guy I was going to is Elias Lindholm. I mean, obviously, last offseason we gave him a big contract for 7 years, and I mean, first year, obviously, it seems like with the big contracts they don't do as well. But that second year of getting more familiar with the players that you're playing with, I think definitely in our power play looks a lot better. And I think maybe percentage-wise it hasn't been much better, but I think those goals that we're scoring on the power play have come at big times, and it seems like Elias Lindholm and Pastrnak and Geeky, their connection is a lot more on par.
100%. Geeky's another guy you just mentioned as well, who's been really good the last couple of years, right? He was a guy that was a low-risk, high-reward potential, right? The Bruins didn't give him really much money in his first deal with them, and then really outplayed his contract last year, outperformed, and got paid this, past year. He deserved it, right? He's been an awesome player for the Bruins. And I think when we last spoke, probably about, whenever it was, probably a year or so ago, you were a fan of him back then, and obviously now you've seen his game develop even more. Have you been happy to obviously watch him, grow into more of a scorer with the Bruins?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first line I don't think really is the problem, but obviously, yeah, it's about building those second, third, and fourth lines. And I think Victor Arvidsson so far this year, obviously it's only been 4 games, but I mean, he's looked like to be in the right places at the right times. I mean, seems like he's on par with most of the players. And I think Marco Sturm just knows how to really balance the whole team and really keep them calm, where it's like we're seeing guys that most Bruins fans probably haven't heard of most of these guys that are just coming into the league, and it's like they look like they've been there for 10 years,
100%. Yeah, these guys are playing like veterans. And it's early on, right? Anything can happen from this point. But the Bruins starting the year 3-1 is great considering everyone had low expectations for them. Right now, with the way things have looked with them and how they've played, and also kind of what your expectations were heading into the year, where do you see this team come March and April when obviously it's the dog days of the season and you're trying to fight for a playoff spot? Where do you think this team will be at that point?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're very young. I don't know if they'll exactly be a playoff team this year, but at the same time, it's who knows? Because, I mean, a lot of coaches are going to get fired. There's going to be a lot of injuries. But, yeah, I think they'll be, right on the brim, probably, right in that wild card spot. But I think they'll probably just miss it. But I think Swayman will have a much better year, as I said. I think our team will become a lot more balanced throughout the year. I think Marco Sturm will probably go to Swayman more. Obviously, right now, he's probably trying to just switch him off, see who's the right fit, who's going to come through most of the year. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's just going to play out. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I think Swayman will be that lead guy, but I think early on in the season, you want to get both guys acclimated, right, and get them back, into shape. But with this team, I think you said it best. I think they'll be right on the brink of being a playoff team. I think they'll be either a few points in or a few points out. Right now, I'm leaning they'll be a few points out, but that means they'll be playing quality hockey games in March and April and have a chance for a playoff spot. One guy I want to mention, you've mentioned obviously they have a lot of new guys this year. Jordan Harris, from a Northeastern Husky, from a Canadian as well, and played for the Blue Jackets. He looked pretty good for the Bruins so far. He's already got a goal, had his first career goal as a Bruin yesterday, which is obviously great to see. And he's a local kid that was great at Northeastern. And he's one guy, when I saw play at Northeastern, you always felt calm, cool, collected. He was on the ice because he's a smart player, knows when to chip it against the boards, knows when to advance the puck on his own, knows when to shoot, knows when to get back on defense. He's been awesome, I think, so far in these first couple games he's played in. Do you hope he stays in the defensive rotation for the rest of the year? I know they've battled some injuries, obviously, but do you hope he stays in the rotation?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, obviously it's a small sample size, but when you're coming from the home team, it seems like there's a lot more momentum. People want to play for that home team. People want to get the environment of the Boston Garden, where it's like, especially in hockey, you probably don't get that in many buildings. Where, as you said, former Northeastern Husky, he's played in big games, played in the Bean Pod, obviously, is a huge tournament. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's played at the Garden, so, I mean, let's hope he can stay with it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's a great point. You said he's already played in big games there and won a few big-time games there, winning the Bean Pot, playing in the Hockey East tournament there. He's obviously been into big games in big moments there over the last few years. So it's great to see him as a Bruin. I think he's one of the most underrated players on the roster. I think nobody really talks about him because obviously he didn't do too much in the moments he got in Montreal and Columbus. I think it was just limited opportunities, and that was part of the reason. But also he's more of a heading into the year is more of a replacement defenseman in case there were injuries, and that's why he's getting some moments right now. But I think he's worked his way through the first couple of games. He's worked his way into being a legitimate piece in the defensive rotation for the rest of the year. I think he's awesome, and as I said, I saw him play a lot at Northeastern, and I'm very confident in his game. One thing you already mentioned here is obviously the Bruins and the goal scoring, which you're hoping obviously some other guys step up like Geeky, like Lindholm. Do you think the Bruins could ever make a big-time trade? And I don't think they will just because of where they stand right now as a roster. I don't think they're going to go trade for a big goal scorer at the deadline, and obviously we're a ways away from that. But in the event the Bruins are, a potential playoff team right around the deadline, do you think Sweeney could potentially go out and get a goal scorer?
I mean, seeming with Don Sweeney, most likely not. And I feel like, obviously, Pastrnak probably being one of the top 5 goal scorers in the league, it's kind of tough to really get what you call like a goal scorer necessarily when you already got one of the best in the game. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think, Don Sweeney seems like he's usually a little questionable at the deadline.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And even the ones he goes out and gets at the deadline, sometimes they end up leaving, like we've seen over the last couple of years, where they make a big-time trade and then obviously don't bring those guys back. We're talking big-time goal scoring here. One guy, Connor McDavid, just got an extension, 2 years, $25 million from Edmonton. And then obviously Eichel got an extension as well from the Golden Knights, 8 years, $108 million. What do you think of either one of those deals? The McDavid deal to me is basically figure this out in the next couple of years. We'll give it another shot and try to make another cup and try to potentially win. And if it doesn't work out, I may leave if, they don't put a better team around them. But what do you think of both of those deals? We'll start with McDavid's.
Yeah, I think obviously it's kind of nuts to see him get paid that low. When you just saw Kirill Kaprizov get a new deal for the most money ever in the NHL history, it's like, the guy's getting paid $17 million a year, where it's like, now you got the best player of our generation only signing for 12.5, which is what he's been making already for the last 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. And as you said, it's kind of just like figure it out in these next 3 years or I'm gone. And I really think they need a new goalie. It's like, Stuart Skinner, don't get me wrong. He's not the worst, but at the same time, to get over the hump of the Florida Panthers, I think you're going to need definitely a better goalie, and I think their defense has to step up too. They take way too many penalties from what I've seen in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think if you look at this team too, with a hometown discount for McDavid over the next couple of years, and obviously with the salary cap rising too, they're going to have some money to spend on defense and maybe at the goal, tending position. When you look at Skinner, like you said, he's not the worst, he's not the best, he's probably middle of the pack, and he's had some moments, right? He's got them to the Stanley Cup Finals a couple times over the last few years, right? 2 years in a row they've made it. And he wasn't the main reason, but he contributed to them in some of those moments. But like you said, getting over the hump and trying to beat a team like Florida, that's been an issue for this team, for Edmonton, and they've had great comebacks. Coming back 3-0 a couple years ago is awesome, and then even this past year, too, giving it a fight, but obviously not having enough to beat that stacked Florida lineup. I do expect them to maybe go get another goaltender at some point, whether it's, after the current season ends, that would be my guess, and maybe they use some of that discount that McDavid gave them to go figure that out. And then when you look at Eichel's contract, right, he got paid heavily, right, 8 years, $108 million. What did you think of that deal when it went down?
I thought it was... I expected him to stay, but I was surprised, obviously, him getting more than McDavid. But, McDavid obviously took a big discount. And I think Vegas is really going all in because, they just signed Eichel, obviously, to a huge one. And they signed Marner this past offseason, who obviously has been one of the best players in our league since he came in. And, it's kind of crazy. Now, the Golden Knights, they were saying, from the 2015 draft, they have, I think, 3 of the top 5 picks or something like that. And it's like 10 years ago, the Golden Knights weren't even a team. It's like now they got 3 of the top 5 picks from that draft. And it's like, wow, they're really going all in. I mean, obviously, I think Alex Pietrangelo is kind of getting towards retirement. I'm not sure if he's really going to play this year, but I think they still have Aiden Hill, who's huge. Noah Hannafin's a great defenseman, and I mean, Marner, and I don't know if you've been watching their first couple games. Pavel Dorofeev, he's looked unreal. I think he's got like 6 goals or something in like 4 games or something crazy like that.
I haven't seen much of them, to begin the year, but I did see they've had some big time goal scoring, to begin the season, and we'll see how things work out. That team's a unique lineup, right? They have some veterans, and then obviously have some young players as well that they can potentially win with. I think, like you said, Pietrangelo is probably towards the end, if not already, basically there. And do they still have Mark Stone as well?
Yeah, they do. He's their captain still,
yeah. I was going to say, they still got Stone, so they do have a lot of depth. It's just a crazy lineup. When you look at them, you look at Florida, like their rosters are just seems like levels above some of the other teams in the NHL. So we'll see how those two teams, play out. I think those two teams right now, talent-wise, even with the injuries Florida has, their lineup's still crazy how talented they are,
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely see how good the Bruins are in the next couple games, because 3 out of our next 4 games are against Vegas, Colorado, and the Panthers. So those will be big, obviously.
The Bruins, in order to win those games, they're going to need great goaltending, right? They're not going to outscore those teams probably. It's not going to be like a 6-5 win. They're going to need it to be like a 3-2, 2-1, 4-3 game maybe.
You definitely got to stop their power plays because, I mean, Colorado and Vegas are 2 fast teams.
I completely agree with you. I think, honestly, on the penalty kill, I think at some point, which he's not there just yet, but I think Jordan Harris at Northeastern, he was excellent in that role, stepping up, being the guy that can kind of just be an anchor on defense in those situations on the PK. He's not really there just yet because he's still young, and the Bruins obviously have some other guys like McAvoy who's going to obviously be leading the PK unit. But at some point, I think Harris can grow into that role. And we just talked about obviously Stone being the captain for Vegas. What do you think of the Bruins obviously not having a captain once Marchand stepped away?
I was a little confused, but at the same time, it's like, I think at the end of the day, we know who our leaders are. We're looking for Pasternak, we're looking for McAvoy, we're looking at Swayman. I mean, those are the 3 guys that I think have been there the longest now. I think they only have around 5 players remaining from the team that broke the record for most wins in a season. And I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that those are going to be the 3 guys. Obviously, from a leadership standpoint and what goes on in the locker room, who knows, but I think Pasternak's obviously has the numbers to be a captain. I mean, I don't think anybody could deny that. I mean, he's been one of the best players in the league since he came in. So, yeah, I mean, a little confusing, but at the same time, as I said, I think we know who our leaders are.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. I think having the C on the jersey means one thing, but at the same time, you don't need to have a C on the jersey to, be a leader, especially considering you're going to have alternate captains. And if everyone's obviously an alternate captain at the end of the day, they can all obviously be a collective, number one guy, right? They can all kind of add up to what, the one captain would be. And I think when you look at this Bruins team, like you said, Pasternak's going to have to be more of a leader. I think what you saw yesterday in that last minute, right? He's hustling. He's getting back on defense, makes a great save. Then the next shift down, within that same last minute of the game, lights up Kucherov. Like, you saw a lot of fire and passion from him, and the other players on the ice are going to pick up on that. And hopefully that ends up being the case for the rest of the year, right, where he continues to play with fire and plays with that energy. And you don't want to see him get hurt, but you want to see him obviously play, with some physicality, which is obviously something the Bruins have had. That's been their identity the last 5-10 years, maybe 15 years of playing with, that physicality. And they don't really have that same guy that they've had in the past that can kind of be that, bruising guy that, is going to lay people out in the middle of the ice. McAvoy obviously isn't afraid to hit, but
Zadorov has been a big one for
Zadorov's
sure.
great, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think, he does take a lot of penalties at the same time, which I think that's probably why we brought in a guy like Tanner Jeannot, where it's like he's more of like a 3rd or 4th liner where he's more meant to fight type of thing, where a defenseman, obviously, when he's got that big stick and he's 6'6", it's like you don't really want him in the box for 5 minutes. It's like you can use him on the ice. Where I think, as I said, Tanner Jeannot and Mark Kastelich, obviously we brought in last year, are more of our fighting types. Where 3rd or 4th liners, they're not getting as many minutes, but you want them to just bring that aggression.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You're right. You want some guys that can kind of offset that, where if they're going to be off the ice, it's not as big of a loss as losing a guy like Zadorov, because obviously you'd rather have him on the ice and competing and being out there to help you. Before we dive over it, we'll talk some Patriots. Is there anything else you want to mention within the NHL or within the Bruins?
No, I think that's all.
All right, well, we'll dive over now to the Pats. And 4-2 record to begin the year. Now the number one team in the AFC East, tied with the Bills, but they have the tiebreaker over them. Great to see the Patriots first in the AFC East, first time since 2019. What have you seen from this team? Anything you want to comment on, whether it's Drake Maye, the defense, Vrabel as head coach? I'll leave the floor open to you there.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this offseason we had a lot of confidence. I mean, we made a lot of big signings. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, every football fan knows what he can bring to the table. I mean, I think we saw it last week against the Bills where they just looked unreal. Him and Drake Maye just looked to be on the same page every play. And I think our run game has got a little better, to say the least. I mean, obviously, there's been a few fumbles early in the year that have been a little bit costly, but I mean, I think we got three solid running backs in Stevenson. Gibson, obviously, unfortunately, he's out for the year now with that big hit last week. And Travion Henderson, I really liked. We're out of Ohio State, just coming off a national championship. And, I mean, yeah, our offense looks a lot better. And our defense, I mean, you bring in a guy like Milton Williams. I mean, our pass rush looks a lot better. They seem to be a lot more on the same page. Obviously, Vrabel played defense, so he seems very connected with the guys.
Yeah, I think you summed that all up very well. I think, like you just noted, the Patriots' offense looks so much more crisp and smoother this year than last year. And I think Drake Maye kind of progressing, right, over the last year and developing. That's a big thing, and he's looked awesome. And Drake Maye's not a guy I ever criticized. I've always thought he had really good talent. When I did my quarterback rankings heading into the year with the sports guru Mike Hurley, which you got to see him obviously on Saturday night, when we did those rankings, I had him in like the early 20s, and it wasn't necessarily an indictment on Maye. I just thought with the Patriots offense, I was worried about the offensive line, worried about the wide receiver position. I said, I don't know if he's going to put up as big of numbers as some of the other guys that I thought would be, roughly in the middle of the pack. And after the first 4 or 5 quarterbacks, when you rank all of those, after that, every quarterback for the most part similar, depending on what their ceiling is, what their floor is. A lot of them have similar kind of breakdowns when you look at that. Drake Maye, when I watched him play on Sunday, he had some ridiculous throws. He really impressed me. Like, genuinely, this is a guy I was never against, right? I always thought he had really good talent. I just thought the Patriots had to support him with a little bit more help, and I thought maybe next year would be another big jump for him. On Sunday, he looked unreal. He looked awesome. His throws were online. There were some plays that didn't go his way, some bad calls against the Patriots, and maybe even a drop as well that would have been another big-time catch. But he looked awesome. Drake Maye looks composed. The arm talent's there. And I know he's still young. There's going to be growing pains with young quarterbacks. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. You got to just let them play freely. That's what I said about the Giants and Jackson Dart. You got to let them be free. You're going to have really good games like the Giants beating the Eagles and the Chargers, and then you'll have bad games like the Giants losing to the Saints. Drake Maye, though, let him play freely. The Patriots are going to be in a good spot to win a lot of games for the rest of the season. What have you seen from him talent-wise, decision-making? I think he's taken a step up in all of those levels this year.
Definitely right on cue. And I think a big part of it is bringing back Josh McDaniels, where it's like you're throwing in different plays every single play. It's like one play is a bomb, one play is a run, one play is a short pass, where it's like that's going to throw off the defense. And I think it's like he's getting good chemistry with his guys. It's like him and Demario Douglas looked unreal on Sunday. I mean, and honestly, I think everyone's going to point to the Bills as the big turning point in the season. But honestly, Week 3, the loss to the Steelers was really a big turning point for me. They had 5 turnovers and only managed to lose the game by 1 touchdown. And I'm like, wow, the fact that we really stayed in that game, I think, is a good turning point. Because obviously, I don't think any teams are winning with 5 turnovers 90% of the time, regardless of who's on your team.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that's something that's similar to the Giants, right? The Giants lost to the Saints 2 weeks ago now. They had 5 turnovers. The Saints had none, I believe. And then in that Patriots game with the Steelers, right? The Patriots had 5 turnovers. I think the Steelers only had 1. You're not going to win any game unless the other team really struggles, with trying to get points off those turnovers. You're not going to win any game with 4 or 5 turnovers to the other team only having 1 or none. But I feel like that was a turning point for the Giants, right? Even though it's only been 1 week since that game with the Saints, the offense was a lot more crisp against the Eagles because they knew we have to play a little bit more conservative. That doesn't mean, obviously, just do checkdowns the whole game, but that means be smart. We're not going to throw into double coverage. When the blitz comes, have the checkdown guy there ready to go so you're not losing yards every play. And when I'm looking at Drake Maye, the arm talent is great. The arm talent's great. He had some great throws yesterday, and Douglas obviously has now grown some more chemistry with him over the last year. He looks like he's taken a step up. And the Patriots had a tough call against them. That pass interference call, that was tough.
Yeah.
I've never seen that because that was early on and it was right around the line of scrimmage. Like I've never seen that with the pass on the other side of the field too. That was a weird call. You agree with me?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously there's going to be some questionable calls every game, but I mean, they were showing it everywhere where it's like, what are you even supposed to do on that? It's like, I don't know.
That was tough, but the Patriots found a way to, take that and obviously use that to try to, get the lineup, replenish the offense, get the offense, fired up, and use that as a way to, I guess I was going to say revolt against the refs. So that's not really the word, but they used it as a spark, right, offensively, where they obviously see that happen. They didn't let it distract them. They used it as a way to kind of boost the mojo of the team and get everybody, focused to try to make the next play. And they still end up scoring, I believe, on that drive. It just obviously wasn't, to Douglas. I think it was a rushing touchdown after that. But they found a way to use that as a spark and didn't let that get them down. They're going to be bad calls, like you said, but sometimes you'll see bad calls where teams just kind of give up. I think obviously Vrabel being a tough head coach, right? But he's a good head coach, but a tough one. He's going to make sure the players are locked in. They're going to play with a chip on their shoulder every game. And you obviously see that now with the 4-2 record. And you look at the next 7 or 8 weeks, right? At Tennessee, versus Cleveland, versus Atlanta, at Tampa Bay, versus the Jets, at Cincinnati, and then versus the Giants at home. The Patriots are on December 1st. And then the bye week. Where do you see this team over that stretch? That's a 7-game stretch right there with some favorable games, right? You're playing Tennessee, Cleveland, Atlanta, the Giants, the Jets, the Bengals. Where do you see this team heading into the bye week? Do you think at that point, they'll still be holding, hopefully still a playoff spot? Do you think they could still be holding the AFC East lead?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely could because it's like, I think right now, I think we can both admit the Jets and Dolphins probably aren't winning the division. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's clearly going to be between the Patriots and Bills. And I mean, the Bills are taking a slide right now. I mean, they lost to us, which obviously was like, okay, they lost a game. But then last night, they come right back and lose to the Falcons, which it's like nobody was expecting that. I think they were saying 75% of bets were on the Bills. And I mean, the Falcons are usually never a team that you're seeing in prime time. I think last year they played each other, and it was an absolute blowout. It wasn't even a game. Where then Bijan Robinson just absolutely went off last night. I mean, I don't know what's up with the Bills, but, I mean, their offense didn't look the same last night. And, I think we see the same with the Bills and Eagles. It's like the first few weeks they were just looking untouchable, and then it's like they both dropped 2 straight. And it's like, wow, you see how quickly things can change.
Yeah, I think it's a week-by-week league to some degree, right? Well, some teams will show up one week and maybe not the next. There's never, even with the Chiefs, right, they were off and on kind of this year and obviously had a really good, Sunday night win. But when you look at the league, right, there's no dominant team like the Chiefs were for 4 or 5 years and the Patriots were for basically 2 decades. There's no team you really fear, right? Because anybody can win any given week, it seems. There's no more Legion of Boom defense you don't want to play against. I think anybody's can be beatable, right? Anybody can be beaten week in and week out. I think you made a great point there with the Buffalo Bills. I'm not too sure what the issue is. I think they're still missing a number 1 receiver. Keon Coleman, I know, was supposed to kind of grow into that player, and he's been good, but not what they probably were hoping. And then they've had some other pieces, right? And Kincaid was out last night, so you lose your number 1 tight end, but Knox obviously steps up and, makes a big play. But I think they're missing a number 1 receiver. Stephon Diggs kind of transformed that offense over the his last few seasons, then obviously ended up leaving. And Allen's still a great quarterback even without him, but there's still some turnover issues, right? Where at times he'll try to force a pass or force a run and get hit and fumble, right? And it's just, I think they're still waiting on finding another receiver that can be a safety blanket for him. And then as for the Eagles, it seems like there's just a misconnection between Hurts and then his 2 best receivers, Smith and Brown. I think when you look at those 2 guys, they're frustrated with the offense. And I think Hurts is a guy that I had a little bit lower in my quarterback rankings. I think when you look at him, he's won big games. Obviously, he's won a Super Bowl now. But I'm not as confident in his arm as I am with some other guys. Like, I am more confident in Baker Mayfield making a big-time pass than Jalen Hurts. I think that's something that his receivers are upset with. And what do you think is going to be the turning point for one of these teams? Do you think it's a big-time game where Hurts throws for 400 yards, which he threw for 285 against the Giants, and that wasn't enough, obviously, to beat them? Are you thinking it's going to be a game where he throws for 400 yards and hits Brown and Smith for 2 touchdowns apiece, and that kind of gets their mojo back? What do you think could be the turning point for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, I think it's just a chemistry issue. I mean, they have all the talent. They have, as you said, they got Brown, they got Smith, and then Saquon, it seems like, hasn't even been getting as many touches this year, which obviously you're very familiar with as a
Hmm.
Giants fan. But, like, last year they looked like they just, like, couldn't be touched. And I think, I'm not going to say Nick Sirianni's a problem, but at the same time, it doesn't really seem like he can kind of just take control over the team. It doesn't seem like he's good at exactly like calling out the entire team, so to speak. It seems like every week in the media they got something like a little bit, I don't want to say stupid, but controversial, definitely in the media every week, where it seems like they just kind of find a way to be at the top of the headline, even though it may not even be necessarily about the game. It's more just like about their chemistry, as I was saying.
I think you made a great point there. It seems like there's definitely something up with them. Maybe it's a locker room thing. Maybe it's just they're not clicking on offense because I don't know if there were issues in training camp, right, where a guy loses chemistry with his receiver, right, which can happen, right. You can lose a little chemistry, and then there can be that little divide and friction. I think when you look at this team, though, you made a great point with Saquon. He hasn't really been the same exact back, and when you go for as many yards as Saquon did last year for 2,000 plus yards on the ground, it's hard to really recover from that and do that again, right? Because you're getting beat up, week in and week out. And I saw an interesting stat Mike Hurley sent me actually earlier today. Rico Dowdle, in his last 2 games with Carolina, 473 scrimmage yards in his last 2 weeks. Saquon Barkley on the season, 462 scrimmage yards. So Dowdle has had 11 more scrimmage yards over the last 2 games than Saquon has had all season. Isn't that a crazy stat when you look at it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think Rico Dowdle has kind of gone to a whole new level. I mean, I had him on my fantasy team last week. I had him on the bench, but this week I definitely didn't make the same mistake after seeing him drop 33. I mean, Carolina seems like they're nothing special, but I mean, they're definitely coming into their own. I think Bryce Young is definitely starting to get a little more acclimated to that system and starting to find his receivers and get a better offense, better team in general.
Yeah, I love Bryce Young a lot. He was a guy that I expected, and he's been good this year, right? He's had a couple bad moments, but he's been better this year than last year. I expected him to take a step up. I had him actually in my top 10, which is kind of crazy, but I had him in my top 10 rankings based on where I thought he'd be by the end of the year. That's what me and Mike were predicting, where we thought quarterbacks would be 1 through 32 at the end of the season. So basically just their outlook and how we thought they would perform. I thought Bryce Young put up big numbers this year, and he's been good. I think every time he has a bad stretch and it gets to be he's over with, he's a bust, he's not the answer, move on, go to the next guy. He has that stretch of time, right, where it's a game or two, right, where he shows that potential. And like we saw the past couple weeks, where last week he was down, battled back, got a win against the Cowboys, and looked really good in some of those moments. And he obviously now has a number one receiver, Tedero McMillan, a guy that I was a big fan of in the draft process. I thought he could have been a Patriot. The Patriots went the other route and signed Diggs and then obviously drafted Campbell, which it seems like it worked out for the Patriots, just like it might have worked out for Carolina going and get, a number one receiver there for Bryce Young. And that's the guy I want to mention now with you and talk about is Will Campbell. That's the guy I just mentioned here that I want to get your opinion on. What has he brought to this Patriots offense? It's just having a stable left tackle is so important. What have you seen from him to begin the year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously nobody's watching the games to watch the offensive line necessarily, but I mean, I think he brings that mojo, like we saw right on draft night, where he's like, I'm gonna fight and die for this team, and I think basically right when he said that, all Patriots fans were just bought in right away. Where it's like, obviously on draft night, nobody's really exactly bought in on anyone, but I think, yeah, he's definitely got the power. He comes from LSU, obviously. That's a very prestigious school in football. And, yeah, I mean, I only got good things to say about him so far.
Yeah, I think you pointed it out great. I think draft night he got a lot of Patriots fans to buy in on him. And drafting an offensive lineman is never really the attractive pick. Most fans would never really want to draft a lineman unless you're in a position where the last piece you're missing is a lineman and they know that and they say, okay, let's go take him. When you see wide receivers on the board like, Tedero McMillan or a big-time pass rusher, right? If Abdul Carter somehow fell to the Patriots, right? That would be the attractive pick. People would have loved them to take Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Obviously, both those guys are gone, and they go and take, the best player available in Will Campbell. And I thought that was what the Patriots needed. Offensive line is never the sexy draft pick, but it's that needed pick, right? Where you need to help your franchise quarterback take that step up, and he can't do that when he's getting hit, 20 times a game, right? The Patriots offensive line last year was, really an issue. When you draft a tackle that you can rely on, that's something that's really important. Look at Andrew Thomas with the Giants. The Giants have had him, for the last 5 seasons basically, and he's been hurt for a good amount of that stretch. But when he's on the field over that 5 or 6 year stretch, he's one of the best tackles on the field, best tackles in the game, and one of the Giants' best players. I would say probably their best player when he's healthy. And the Giants' offense is so much better when he's there and he's healthy. And I think with Campbell, hopefully he's that answer for the Patriots, right? Over the next 10, 12 years, he can be that bookend left tackle and be that answer for them where okay, we have Drake Maye, we got him. That's obviously a start now to building something special on offense. Henderson's a guy as a running back who maybe could take that step up. And I know they really haven't used him as much this year because they're still using Stevenson. But maybe next year if Stevenson's gone, maybe Henderson ends up being that lead back. Maybe he takes that role over before the year is over with. We'll see how things work out there. But like you said with Campbell, I think you don't really watch a game to watch a tackle. And obviously, at the same time, if the tackle's not getting mentioned on the broadcast, that's a good thing. That means he's not doing anything wrong, right? There's no holding, there's no sacks allowed, and Campbell's been that answer. Is there any other teams you want to mention here? I know we already touched on the Panthers, the Giants a little bit. The Panthers, the Eagles, the Patriots, the Bills, the Falcons even. Any other teams you want to mention?
Yeah, I've actually really been impressed with the 49ers. I mean, I think, you see they're going through so many different injuries every single week. You just saw... they already had 5 guys out, and then it's they lose probably one of their best defensive players in Fred Warner. And then I think Mac Jones has really found a new life in San Francisco. I think Kyle Shanahan, obviously, is very good at finding new players and integrating them into a new system. And I like that him and Kendrick Bourne are still finding success in San Francisco away from New England, where I think they probably carried some of that chemistry over.
Mm-hmm. I think the Mac Jones point is excellent. I think when you're looking at that system, Kyle Shanahan's a very quarterback, friendly offensive coordinator, and I know he's their head coach, but he's calling the plays as well. And when you're setting up an offense where you always are going to have, whether it's even if CMC got hurt, right? If McCaffrey got hurt, you have Brian Robinson, who's a very serviceable back, right? So they're always going to have some sort of talent in the backfield, which is going to help open up that passing game when you have a running game that the defense has to coordinate, and be ready for, right? And then you also look at the pass catchers. They have guys, Pearsall's hurt right now, Ricky Pearsall, but when he was playing with Mac Jones, things were clicking, right? And George Kittle's hurt, right? Obviously he'll be coming back at some point soon. But Mac Jones has found a way to do good things with really just McCaffrey, and then, as well as, Kendrick Bourne. Tongus, the backup tight end, I think it's Jake Tongus, has been, pretty good for them. And maybe he, stays having a role when Kittle is back. But Mac Jones has looked great. And when you looked at the end of his time with the Patriots, did you completely give up on him? I know things, it was his time to leave the Patriots. But did you think maybe if he goes to another team and he's set up in the right position, he could have the success that he has right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly say I gave up, but yeah, as you said, you're not exactly expecting him to have this type of season like he's having right now, especially given the injuries. And it's kind of crazy. I think I've seen a clip. Dan Orlovsky literally just said a couple of years ago, he was like, if Mac Jones had the same offense as Brock Purdy, he'd be doing great. And then they're like, what? What are you talking about? No way. But now you see, he's Brock Purdy's out, Mac Jones steps in, and it's they're 4-2 in a tough division where, the Rams probably haven't been what people exactly thought they could be. And then you got a team like the Seahawks who they've looked pretty good. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba and Sam Darnold. They seem to be on the same page, at least the last couple games that I've watched. Mm-hmm. And Cooper Kupp seems to be definitely getting more acclimated to the system.
Yeah, Kupp just picked up his first touchdown in Seattle, which is good to see. And JSN's been probably the best receiver in the NFL to begin the year, just putting up big-time numbers. And Donald and that Seattle team is kind of a wild card team, right? Because there are going to be days where they look like the best offense, and then some days things won't click. And that's the thing, right? That division's really tough. In order to win that division or even be a wild card coming out of that division, you got to be a team that can put up points. And Seattle's obviously shown that they can do that for the most part to begin the year. And Arizona's a team that I expect a little bit more from him to begin the year, and I know it's a long season, but things weren't necessarily clicking between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray to begin the year before Murray got hurt. And Marvin Harrison Jr., I think one thing, he probably had the yips to begin the year where he was dropping passes and he was probably getting in his head, and then he showed he's obviously, better than, the showcasing of the drops that he had to begin the season. I expect him to continue to get better. I don't know if he'll necessarily be that wide receiver one, top, 5 to 8 receiver in the NFL like he was drafted to be as a prospect, but he's a good receiver. I think a lot of people kind of gave up on him after some of the drops early on in the year, and I don't think really give up, especially when it's 2, 3, 4, 5 games in, right? It's tough to say a guy's, a bust, in year 2. But I know a lot of people were upset with the way he played to begin the year, but I think he's still a talented receiver that you can rely on and, try to get a big catch out of. Another guy that you just mentioned was Brock Purdy. Purdy is probably going to still be that starter even when he comes back healthy. But Mac Jones has stayed kind of consistent with that, saying Purdy is the quarterback and he's the backup. If, in the event Purdy comes back and he struggles, do you think Mac Jones can earn that starting role over him? Or do you think because Purdy got that big-time contract in the last year, he probably ends up staying the starter?
I think he definitely can, because I think if you don't eventually make him the starter, if Purdy is struggling, another team's going to want to buy in on Mac Jones, and I think you definitely don't want him to go to another team and end up burning you. Because, I mean, as we said, Purdy's really got the team ever since he came in. It seems like he's got the pieces to make a good team. Where, I don't know, but as a starting quarterback on one of the best teams, he doesn't exactly it feels like if Brock Purdy goes to more teams, maybe he's not the same,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's the best way to put it. Mac Jones is in a favorable spot right now, just like Purdy is in that same offense, right? When you're in a quarterback-friendly system where you're going to obviously have good skill players, and there's always guys open when you're watching that team play. There's always receivers open, whether it's the way they scheme things or the way they line up receivers, and they have a lot of pre-snap motion, which helps get some momentum and create some space in the open field. That's something that plays their advantage. And Shanahan's a very quarterback-friendly, play caller, right? He's going to have guys open, and they have a good offensive line too, which they're getting older in the offensive line, and they may not be as good as they've been before, but they're still a serviceable offensive line, and you obviously see some good skill players there. One guy I want to mention is Daniel Jones, which we're jumping over now to the Colts. The excellent start they've had to the year. This is a guy that, just like Mac Jones, a lot of people gave up on after Mac left the Patriots and Daniel Jones left the Giants. He's been awesome, though, so far to begin the season. What have you seen in his game? And obviously, Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor putting up crazy numbers to begin the year. What have you seen from them?
Yeah, I mean, I actually made a list I put sleeper teams, and they were right there. I put the Colts, the Falcons, and the Jaguars. And I mean, the Colts have looked unreal. I mean, obviously, they probably haven't faced the best teams yet. I mean, the Broncos, are one of the better teams they beat, and the Rams, I know they lost to, but yeah, as you said, Jonathan Taylor, it seems like the guy's putting up 30 fantasy points every single week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been awesome, and I think one team you just mentioned, that Rams game, right? The Colts lost that game, but they showed that they could stay with one of the better teams in the NFL. And that was important, right? Because Daniel Jones heading into that game, they really only beat some of the weaker defenses heading into that week against LA. A lot of people are saying, well, now this is the letdown game where they're going to really collapse. And Jones didn't play as well in that one as he did in some of the other games, but they were competing. They were in that game, towards the end and had a chance to potentially win. The Rams are one of my sleeper teams. I'll give you 3, and 2 of them you already mentioned. The Colts, that's a sleeper team of mine. Daniel Jones has looked awesome, and he looks a lot more comfortable in this offense than he did in New York. I think when you get a change of scenery and you have a guy like Shane Steichen, like he has in Indianapolis, just like Mac Jones as Shanahan in San Francisco, and you have a quarterback-friendly system, and you have a new change of scenery, and you're not playing in New England, dealing with Boston media, or not playing in New York, dealing with New York media, you have a little less pressure on you, especially considering they have, short-term deals, right? Mac Jones is on a backup contract deal, essentially, and Daniel Jones got decent money for a backup quarterback, but he's not getting paid the money he got in New York after that extension, after the, playoff run the Giants had. When you're playing a little bit more freely and you're in a system that is going to have good playmakers like Jonathan Taylor and a good offensive line, and you obviously start the year on a good note. Morale's up. Daniel Jones is playing a lot more confidently, and it seems like he's navigating through his progressions a lot better than he did in New York. I'm really happy to see that. I think this Colts team, like you said, is a sleeper team. Jacksonville, I would agree with. I think they're a sleeper team. I think Trevor Lawrence still has one of the best talents in the NFL. It's just about obviously putting that into consistent play and staying consistent. That's what I worry about with him, but I think he has the talent to still be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then I'd say the Rams is my third sleeper team, where they weren't necessarily a sleeper team heading into the year because they were very good last year, but they didn't start this year as hard as probably most people expected, and they've had some injuries and some other things not go their way. But I still consider them a sleeper team. I think they could still make a run in the NFC, considering I feel like the NFL is wide open this year. But let's talk about that Jacksonville team really quick. When you look at Trevor Lawrence, you look at that Jacksonville Jaguars team, what do you see from them? Obviously, they have some really good talent on both sides of the ball, right? Josh Hines-Allen on the defensive side. You got Travis Etienne. You got Brian Thomas Jr., who's now starting to click with Trevor Lawrence. You got Trevor Lawrence. What have you seen from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you bring in a guy like Travis Hunter, everybody's going to be hyped up. I mean, I think it just puts a whole new outlook on the new season when you bring in such a dynamic guy. And I think what seems to be the biggest thing is Liam Cohen looks like he seems just like very calm, and he's got like the funny interviews. He's always in. We saw him in Robert Saleh's face a few weeks ago. It's like, I mean, I think that's just a coach that everybody wants to buy into and wants to play for. And I think, as you said, we saw with their defense too last week when on Monday Night Football running back a 100-yard touchdown. Like, I mean, I think, and you beat the Chiefs when I think Chris Fowler was saying on one of the broadcasts, he's like, if anyone told you week 1 that the Jaguars were going to have a better record than the Chiefs going into Monday Night Football week 5, you'd call them nuts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a team, too. The Jaguars lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs, I think it's 2 seasons ago now, and they were right there. That was one of the Chiefs' Kansas City's closest playoff games that year, and the Jaguars had a chance to win that one. I think it was a low-scoring game. It was like 21-10 or something like that, 24-14, but Jacksonville was in that game, and then obviously having a good start to the year and beating them now is great to see. And I think coaching is very important. I think when you look at this Patriots team, right, Vrabel, good head coach, knows how to time manage. You have McDaniels now calling the plays on offense. That's a guy that's had a lot of success being a play caller in the NFL. You look at Shanahan with Mac Jones. You look at Daniel Jones with Shane Steichen. You look at Liam Cohen, right, with Trevor Lawrence. Coaching is so important, whether it's play calling, whether it's a head coach, right, knowing how to manage a game, and that's obviously going to put your team in a better position to win some ball games, especially in close games. It's really important to have a really good coach. And a lot of those guys we just mentioned that have taken steps up have a coach that, can help them and guide them. I think with that team in Jacksonville, though, they're an underrated squad. And like you just mentioned, you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence and some other good pieces as well, especially defensively. They have what it takes, especially in a weaker division, right, where the Texans are having a down year and the Titans are obviously, probably still contending for a top 3 pick. You have a chance to win that division. It's really just them and obviously the Colts and Jaguars, right, that are going to be playing for that. The Texans, I don't really know what's up with them, but they don't seem like the same team that they were 2 years ago, and then even last year was a down year, but they don't even look like that, right now.
Yeah, and I'll ask you the same question you asked me about Mac Jones. Did you think Daniel Jones was going to be able to have the success he's having? Obviously, I think a name like Indiana Jones too definitely is pretty fly and gets the wings going.
Yeah, no, it gets a fan base behind you, right? When you have that, it's going to create some passion. You're going to gain fans just by the name and obviously the way they've been playing. I think that helps him confidence-wise. I would say yes. I completely felt like Daniel Jones would have success when he left the Giants. I didn't know what type of success, right? I'd said for years when he was a Giant and the fans were against him, I said he's going to leave the Giants and he's going to win 2 Super Bowls just like Jim Plunkett did when he left the Patriots and was a top pick, left the Patriots, was basically ran out of town, then won 2 Super Bowls with the Raiders. I thought Daniel Jones would have similar success. I still believe, even at this very moment, Daniel Jones is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Whether or not he's shown that every play, I completely understand he's had bad moments and he's had bad decisions. But I thought all in all, if Daniel Jones had a good team around him, where you set him up with an offensive line, have even a couple skill players, right? What you saw last year with Malik Neighbors, only for a few games, he put up some good numbers with Malik Neighbors in the first, 3 or 4 games of last season before, Daniel Jones ended up getting benched. He was hurt as well. But when Malik Neighbors was in the game with him, they were really good for that 3 or 4 game stretch. Had 2 touchdowns against the Browns last year and, good win early on in the season. But he never really had a wide receiver one. What'd you say?
And to your point, I saw an interview with Malik Neighbors last year. They were like, what's going to be the new change? And he goes, I don't know, but I can tell you that the QB is not the problem.
Yeah, he was right, though. He was right. I don't think Daniel Jones is the issue in New York. I think there were a lot of things. Not having a wide receiver one, which it wasn't Neighbors' fault, but it took until year 6 for the Giants to get Daniel Jones a wide receiver one. They tried with Kenny Golladay. Obviously, that was a big-time miss. They tried with Kadarius Toney. That was another big miss. Darren Waller they tried with. That was a miss. And then Waller now is somehow turned back time, and he's good again in Miami. But I think Daniel Jones, I had full faith in that he would be a good quarterback when he left the Giants. I think it just depended on where he was going. If he was going to a team like the Vikings, for example, and he's going to be a backup, you never know when he could go and, be as a starter again. But he got a chance.
Having a big guy like Tyler Warren, too, definitely makes a big change. I mean, obviously, he was probably the best tight end coming out of college. And,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, Brock Bowers is probably having a down year compared to last year, but people are saying he's kind of what Brock Bowers was last year, where they just came in and they can just that size kind of just seems to like make a big difference.
Yeah, it opens up the offense. You have a guy that can run as well as they can, route running wise, have good hands, they're reliable. You can catch them 15 yards down the field or 5 yards, and they can, run after the catch. Both reliable guys, and I think that's what Daniel Jones needed, was somebody that was a reliable piece. And that's just something they didn't really have. They had Saquon, obviously, which helped the run game, and that did open up the offense. I mean, the Giants won a playoff game on the road in Minnesota with Daniel Jones and Saquon. But where the Giants were at with Daniel Jones, especially last year, there just wasn't really enough around him. And now you see in Indianapolis, he's getting a chance to shine. I thought at Minnesota, if he stayed there, he would have been the backup between, if Darnold stayed or if J.J. McCarthy obviously now is the starter. But if they, and I know he's banged up, but if they stayed with him, as a backup, he would have never got really a chance to shine. But he goes to Indianapolis and has a chance to start and, compete for that starting role. And obviously you now see he's put up some good numbers in Indianapolis. So I did stay with full faith in Daniel Jones, and I'm happy I did because there are a lot of points along the way that I could have turned against him, but I stuck with them. And I think that kind of goes to any athlete you're a big fan of, right? You're going to stay with them through the ups and downs. The Patriots never really had an up and down, I guess Mac Jones, but when they had Tom Brady, it was just a lot of winning, right? They were never really used to losing, and they were never really bad stretches where you'd say, I don't know if Tom Brady's the answer. But you saw that with Mac Jones, where there were good stretches and bad stretches, and people in the fan base are going to turn against you, just like Daniel Jones in New York. But it seems like they're both in better positions now. Now, speaking about the Giants, I want to jump over to Jackson Dart really quick, and then we'll talk some Sox and some Celts. With Jackson Dart and this Giants team, what have you seen from them? I know you're a fan of Cam Scatterboo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of both of them. I think, like, when you have a running quarterback, it definitely makes a huge difference because it's like they're going to have the guys down the field. I mean, obviously it's tough now that Malik Neighbors isn't there. But, I mean, I think, two of the last 3 games, Jackson Dart has had a running touchdown where Russell Wilson, he used to be like that. But, I mean, now that he's older, it's obviously not as easy to run when every guy is younger and faster than you every year. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Scatterboo is just a bull. I mean, you give the guy the ball, it's like you can get 3 to 5, 7 yards every single play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he runs with a lot of heart, right? Even in a situation which he's now been, contributing on the offensive side of the ball for all season, but now the last 4 or 5 weeks he's kind of taken over the lead back role, especially with Tyrone Tracy being hurt. Now he's back, but it seems like Scatterboo stayed the lead back. He just runs with a lot of firepower and a lot of energy, and I think that's what this Giants team needed. They need an identity. Guys that play with grit, play with a chip on their shoulder, play physical, right? That's what you see on the defensive side. Abdul Carter is a guy that looks for contact, right? And he's not afraid to, blow up, offensive lineman at the line of scrimmage or a running back even that's in pass protection. You need those guys that play physically, especially in today's NFL. And you see that with Scatterboo. You see that with Jackson Dart, which one critique on my side of his game is I worry about him because he doesn't really like to slide. He's starting to a little bit more, but he's taking a lot of hits. Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we saw he was right in the tunnel last week or on Thursday, whatever it was.
Thursday, yep.
It's like a few plays. It's like Brian Dable's losing his mind that he doesn't have his new QB in the game. It's like he's arguing with the medical team. You got every single player peeking into the tent, seeing when he's going to be back.
Yeah, I think obviously, and I mentioned this in the podcast last week when I did a recap of that game. You don't see that often. You'll see guys get hurt. And players will obviously be wishing them well. You'll see sometimes they'll get down on one knee. They'll go tap them, as they're leaving the field, whether it's on a cart or they're walking off. But you never see people necessarily go into the tent. And I think that just shows how important is Jackson Dart to this offense. I think everybody realizes, and no disrespect to Russell Wilson, but he's much past his prime. When Russell Wilson was on the field, you didn't really have that same juice offensively. When Dart's in the game, the Giants have a chance to win. And I think you saw that with Dable running over and Scatterboo running over to the blue tent. They were concerned, obviously, about him health-wise, but they obviously knew as well how important he was to that offense. And even missing a play or two could have potentially been the difference in that game. And luckily, he got in that current drive ended. He got back in that next drive and ended up being fortunate for the Giants. They were able to win that game. But Dart plays with a lot of juice, and I think he said in that post-game interview, somebody mentioned, hey, you're taking a lot of hits. And he said, it's important for me to get the first downs, and it's important to the team. So if it means he has to take an extra hit or two, he's fine with that. It's just, if he does get hurt, this team, and you're 2-4, so it's not like they're going to make necessarily a great run, but there are some potential winnable games. They obviously just beat the Eagles and the Chargers, two playoff teams, the way things currently stand. They're, I think, a team that isn't necessarily a surprise team, because I think at 2-4 and a tough schedule, they're not going to make a run to the playoffs. But they're going to be a respectable team where you're going to play them and you're not necessarily just going to check a box and say it's a W for the rest of the year. And that's a credit to Dart and Scatterboo, because of the chip what they play on their shoulders. They're going to give you it their all every game, and they're going to bring a spark. Even against a team like the Eagles, a team we haven't beaten, they're going to play with the spark and be a potential team that, can mess with some of those teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. They could be potentially a team in December that is beating a team, that's fighting for a playoff spot that ends up being the reason they missed the playoffs. But I agree with you. I think this Darton and Scatterboo combo has really, flipped the momentum and flipped the confidence, and obviously given a lot of energy to this team. Where do you think this Giants team can be? Which they're 2-4, tough schedule rest of the way. What do you think is ideal for this team heading into the rest of the year? Do you think if they finish 7-10, 8-9, that's a good season?
Yeah, exactly. That's honestly where I kind of see them. And I mean, obviously, you kind of, I don't want to exactly say throw away, but you sort of throw away 3 games with having Russell Wilson. Obviously, he played great against the Cowboys, which was could have gone either way. But I mean, now you got Malik Neighbors out, who's your top receiver. He's out for the year, and I think, as you said, 7-10, 8-9 will give them a lot of momentum going into next year when you got 3 key pieces in Dart, Scatterboo, and Malik Neighbors all there. Mm-hmm. And I think from what I've seen in the past few years, they seem pretty good at drafting as well.
Yeah, they've had some good hits, which we've missed on a couple guys. Kayvon Thibodeau's really grown into his own the last 5 games, 6 games. He's been awesome. He's been a real highlight on the defensive side. They've missed on a couple guys, and it wouldn't necessarily be something that I don't know if I can even blame the Giants, because Evan Neal, right, was potentially the number 1 overall pick in the 2022 draft. The Giants get him at number 7, and he just hasn't lived up to his hype. But besides that, they've found a lot of gems in late rounds. Drew Phillips is a good rotational cornerback that's kind of stepped up for them. You see a guy like Scatterboo. You see Jackson Dart. You see Theo Johnson, who's been a contributor at the tight end position. You see Abdul Carter, which, I mean, he just fell to them. They kind of got lucky just getting him at 3. But they've seen some, good pieces that they've drafted over the last couple of years. And you can have some hits, you can have some makes. But for the more of the better contributors on the team right now, they were guys they drafted, right? Carter, Scatterboo, Dart, Neighbors before he got hurt. They brought in some good pieces. So we'll see how they do the rest of the year. But any other teams you want to mention in the NFL before we dive over to another sport?
Not exactly a team, but I had a question. What do you think about Brian Callahan getting fired week 6? And I think a stat that really stood out to me was, I think they said the past 4 QBs, first overall picks, all their coaches have been fired mid-season in their first year, where it's like, I don't get how are you expecting to build continuity like that? It's like the players come in, they're in a system, and then it's like week 10, 6, 14, whatever it may be, they got a whole new system coming in. It's like I don't really know if it probably kind of debunks the confidence of the starting QB. It's ugly, to say the least.
That's a great stat. I love that you mentioned that one, because that's an important one. I think when you look at, like we already mentioned, coaching is so important, and having a consistent offensive coordinator, same offensive system, the same head coach, it's important for these young quarterbacks, especially when they're trying to develop week by week. With Daniel Jones, that was an issue, right? By year 4 or 5, you already had 3 head coaches and 4 play callers, right? And that's really difficult. And now you look at a guy like Cam Ward, who's already now going to be on his 2nd head coach, and he's only 6 games into his career. He's going to have a 2nd head coach, and maybe at the beginning of next year have a whole new offensive system. If they try to have an interim head coach and then clear the house again, which they probably end up doing because they're midway through the season, that's just going to be tough for that young quarterback to develop. And you saw that with the rest of the guys we already mentioned, right? The Bears did it with Caleb Williams. The Panthers did it with Bryce Young. Jacksonville did it with Trevor Lawrence. It's just really tough for those guys to have a consistent upwards trend, right, and continue to learn and develop when they have new coordinators and new play callers and new systems they got to learn year in and year out. I thought Callahan, I don't have high expectations for this Titans team, so I don't necessarily understand the firing right now, because I don't know if the owner consider them to be a playoff team, and maybe he thought they would be like last year's Washington Commanders and, have a rookie quarterback that really transcends and takes them up just like C.J. Stroud did with the Texans. But I don't have high expectations for this team, so I thought firing him was a little bit tough, especially early on in the season, but it's a brutal business, right? It's a business at the end of the day, and I guess you can't be shocked. Now the Patriots have them, right, this coming week.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be Rabel's return to Tennessee. It's like, I think that's the question a lot of people are asking the owners. It's like, you just fired Vrabel, who's now doing well in New England, and then you fire Brian Callahan 6 weeks in, and it seems, I think they were saying the owner doesn't even want to answer questions. They're just like sending in representatives to answer questions for them.
Yeah, it's tough. The owner obviously has the right to delegate the power and say, hey, someone else has to answer these questions. Even though I'm the most powerful one and I'm the top of the line here, I can throw somebody else out there to answer these tough questions. And you see that a lot. You'll see general managers probably talk about trades that they didn't necessarily want to make because the owner maybe wanted to trade a guy if they were a distraction. Or I think that's what happened with Dave Gettleman trading Odell Beckham Jr. back in 2019. I think that was something, I don't think it was necessarily a Gettleman or a football decision. I think it was maybe ownership saying, hey, we want to move on from this guy because we feel like he's a distraction. I think that was even the case with Chaim Bloom trading Mookie Betts. I don't think he was necessarily a distraction like the Giants saw Odell, but I think they saw we're not going to pay this guy more than $300 million. So day one, try to go out and trade him because we're not going to pay him, whatever money he wants. But that's a tough thing, like you said. They could delegate that power and throw somebody else up there to take the blame, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you brought up Mookie Betts. I think that'll be a good time to transition now into baseball. And I think we saw that this year with Rafael Devers. It's like everyone kind of just like was like, oh, Red Sox are selling again. They're going to just do the same thing as not last year because they tried to buy in, but obviously didn't work out well. But, I mean, when you throw out Devers like that and the guy was one of our best hitters, if not our best hitter, it's like everyone's like, wow, they're just selling everybody. They're getting rid of the whole team. But then you see a guy like Roman Anthony who comes up not out of nowhere because obviously he was a great MLB prospect, but you obviously never know how they're going to actually be in the actual league. And, I mean, to say the least, I don't think anyone really saw at the beginning of the season that the Red Sox were going to end up in a playoff spot. And, I mean, our pitching has looked unreal. And then, as I said, Roman Anthony's been the big new spark.
Yeah, Roman Anthony was that guy that they needed that could be that new juice to the lineup, especially after Devers left. Anthony brought, that extra base potential, which was important. You need a guy that can get, doubles and home runs, especially at Fenway Park. You have that. That's a big asset. And I think that's what they saw with Anthony. He was really reliable. And then when he got hurt, the offense was never the same, which shows how important he was to that team, especially before he went down with the injury. The Red Sox offense was really clicking. And then once he got hurt, wasn't the exact same. Masataka Yoshida did get hot towards the end of the season, especially in September and then even in October. But they were waiting for a guy that could kind of carry that offense after Anthony got hurt. Yoshida wasn't necessarily that answer right away because he was still kind of coming back from an injury, and it took him some at-bats to get back on track. But you saw Anthony's influence in the lineup once he got hurt, how important he was. When you look at this Red Sox team, you mentioned obviously Devers being gone, and that was a big loss of power. What do you think this Red Sox team could do this offseason to try to address that, whether it's a trade, whether it's signing?
I think, obviously, maybe I'm like a little bit high over horses on this one, but I think Pete Alonso, I've been seeing his name swirling around. Obviously, it doesn't seem like he's going to re-sign with the Mets. Obviously, the Mets just paid Juan Soto a boatload last year, and I think Pete Alonso seems like the guy that is going to want a big contract, obviously being one of the best first basemen in the league. And, I mean, I think first base, obviously, we're going to have Costas coming back, but at the same time, the guy's very injury-prone. He's never really there for 162 games. It seems like he's there for a couple months, and then it's like he's out for a couple months, and then maybe he comes back, whatnot. And I think a guy like Pete Alonso, who's such a big bat and such a big first baseman, I mean, I think that could be a big change.
Yeah, I agree. I think Alonso could be a lot of juice added to the lineup. Hit 38 home runs this year, 871 OPS, and he's been really good at Fenway in his career. 3 home runs, 893 OPS in 10 career games. Could definitely take advantage of the green monster if we gave him the opportunity. Was in the lineup. And I think, like you said with Casas, was a really good prospect and showed a lot of potential, especially even 2 years ago, right? He was one of the better hitters in baseball for a stretch of time. But obviously he's battled injuries, and now with him being coming back from a real tough injury, I don't think you necessarily rely on him. I don't think that should prevent you from going out and getting another piece. Even if you have a good lineup with everybody healthy, you can always find a spot for a guy. Even if it's Costas now being a DH, or I don't know what they could do. Maybe they could trade him after that. But I don't think that should prevent you from going out and getting a guy like Alonso. If you think he could be potentially that piece that could bring that Red Sox offense to the next level and bring them up in the division, you don't make that move, or you don't avoid making that move just because you have Costas, right? Because he's injury prone, like you said. But Costas is a guy I haven't given up complete faith on, but there is a question mark with him. So I don't think that should prevent you from going out and getting a guy like Alonso. What would you think about Kyle Schwarber? Do you think there's any chance the Sox could go get him? I know it's probably unlikely, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we would love that, but I think his ticket is going to be a little more expensive than the Red Sox are willing to go. I mean, I think we saw that with Juan Soto last year, where it's like the Red Sox will go up to $600 million, but it's like once the Yankees, Mets, Dodgers go up to $700, it's like I don't think Craig Breslow is really gonna put the pieces up at $700 million for a guy like Kyle Schwarber, who's not even gonna play the field. He's just a hitter. Mm-hmm. Where, I mean, I think Andy let him go a few years ago, where I think it's tough to want to re-sign with a team that let you go a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
I agree. I think it'd be tough to get him back, especially considering Philly knows how important he is to that lineup. So I don't think they'd want to let him go. He led baseball in home runs and RBIs, or led the NL in home runs and RBIs with 56 home runs and 132 runs batted in. So he was awesome, and I don't think they would let him walk, especially considering how important it is in today's day to have power in your lineup. That's, a very important part of analytics, is having guys that can really take over games and with one swing of the bat. And I think when you look at the Red Sox, it would be great to have him as the DH. But like you just mentioned, he was already here, and we obviously let him go. And that was a decision because they had J.D. Martinez still, and they had some faith in Bogart still at that time as well. They thought maybe potentially letting him walk was the better idea, which it's tough. You look back, and it would have been nice to have him. But he's turning 33 years old in March. Alonso's turning 31 in December, so they're getting a little bit older. And I think Schwarber's going to get probably a 3 or 4 year deal. You look at Alonso, he's probably going to want like a 5 to 7 year deal is what he's hoping for, which who knows what he'll get. And he's a Scott Boras client, so he'll probably get as much money as possible. But I think the Red Sox will be more likely to sign Alonso than Schwarber, just because also first base is still a need, I believe, for this team. What do you think about Marcelo Mayer? Where do you think he fits with this team next year? If Bregman were to potentially walk, does that mean Mayer's now the third baseman, or do you think they maybe rotate him around at second, short, third, no matter what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trevor Story is definitely going to be our main shortstop. But, I mean, yeah, Bregman is definitely up in the air right now, obviously. He'll probably get some good money. Or, I mean, he's already making good money with the Red Sox, but I'm sure he seems like he wants a longer deal because he's only got about 2 years left on this Red Sox contract. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, Marcelo Mayer, I think he could definitely play either second or third base. I mean, he's one of the top prospects ever since he even came up in the first. I think, what do we draft him at? 4th overall, I believe.
You got it. Yep, 4th overall.
Yeah, and obviously this year he was injured towards the end of the year, but when he was in for I think it was like June and July or so, he looked pretty solid from what I saw.
Yeah, he showed some promise, and there's going to be growing pains. I think Roman Anthony is the only rookie that really came up and kind of stayed consistent for the Red Sox. Like Christian Campbell came up and was great in April and some of May, and then really struggled after that. Mayer was kind of off and on, where he was, good for a stretch, bad for a stretch, good for a stretch, but it was also like mixed up. He'll be 0 for 8, but then have a really big hit, after that, and then he might be 3 for 4 in his next game, but then 0 for 8. And that just happens as a rookie, right? But he did show promise, like you said, and definitely showed potential to be that, piece in the lineup for the next few years. You mentioned Bregman, you mentioned Story. Both of them opt-out potentials. I think Bregman is a given he's going to opt out and probably try to go get more, total money on his next contract. Trevor Story, 3 years, $55 million left. There's still a question mark about whether or not he'll opt out. And if he does, I think the Red Sox see him as, the leader. And now he had a really good year this past year. Was probably their most important player. Of those two players, though, Bregman and Story, which one do you think has a better chance of being back in Boston next year?
I'd definitely say Story. I mean, I think with the contract we gave him and the fact that his first 2 years on the contract, he barely even played. So, I mean, when you're making that money, and then this year, obviously, he had an excellent year, and I think you're going to almost have to pay him.
Yeah, I would agree, especially considering the potential he had to steal bases 31 stolen bases, 32
Yeah.
attempts, 96 RBIs, a 741 OPS, 25 home runs. It's tough to replace that, especially in an offseason where there's not really big-time shortstop names in the market, right? So it's hard to replace that. I would imagine he stays. I think it's kind of a given just because I would be really surprised if he does opt out, I'd be surprised if the Red Sox to let him walk. I think Bregman, it's more likely he opts out and maybe goes and gets more money elsewhere. We'll see what ends up happening there. He wasn't the exact same player when he came back from the injury, and that's just because he, lost his mojo middle part of the season where he was injured, and his last 63 games only hit .250 with a 724 OPS and 7 home runs. Was an all-star, though, and is still a reliable glove at third base. I'd like to see him back, especially considering he's a good leader. If the Red Sox do bring him back, though, what would be the most amount of years you'd give him on a deal? Because he's getting up there a little bit in age now as well. Would you give him a 4 or 5 year deal? Would that be kind of your ceiling?
Yeah, I was thinking around 4 because, we've already got him signed for the next 2, technically. But if you can get him 2 more years, he's been in the league for almost 10 years now, where most guys are going about 15 to 20 years, and then maybe who knows what happens after that. But as we've said, we got a lot of young talent. We've shown a lot of potential definitely this year by making the playoffs when you've got such a young team and you got guys like Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, and now you have a great pitching staff as well. You got Garrett Crochet signed for the next 6 years. Obviously, I think we're going to need a couple more starters. I think Brian Bayo is going to be one of our guys. Conley early, he looked pretty solid from what I saw. Kyle Harrison has looked all right, but I think seeing him next year in a full season will definitely help.
Yeah, I think Harrison's a guy I'm pretty high on. He showed potential, and I think I know it's early on, right? And he's only had 19 to third innings in the regular season, but I think he can be a potential 3 starter next year if things do work out. He potentially takes that step up and he gets more opportunities. There's going to be growing pains. That's everything with every young player, every young quarterback, every young pitcher, every young hitter, right? Like you mentioned with Meyer and Anthony and Campbell. There's going to be growing pains. You need to let them just play freely, make their mistakes, obviously have their successes, and then learn from each of those. I think the Red Sox are going to have to rely on some of those young pitchers next year, whether it's Peyton Tolley, Connolly early, or even we just mentioned Tolley early, and then Kyle Harrison. They're going to have to rely on those guys to potentially be the 4th or 5th starter next year. Cutter Crawford will be coming back, which is good to see. We'll see where he fits in the rotation. He's a guy that showed a lot of promise 2 years ago. He looked like he could be the 3rd or 4th starter for the next 4 or 5 years if things do work out. You mentioned a good point with Bregman. Most guys now are playing the stars are playing 15 to 20 years. If the Red Sox can get Bregman under contract for a 4-year deal, you're getting probably his last 3 or 4 years of his prime, which would be great to see. But we'll obviously see how things work out there. One offseason move you'd like to see the Red Sox make? Is it a trade for Joe Ryan? Is it signing Schwarber? Is it signing Pete Alonso? You have one wish. What would it be for the Red Sox to go do? And obviously, trading for Shohei Ohtani would, be tough to do. We're probably not going to be able to do that. But of things that are, potential that the Red Sox could do, what would you love to see them do this offseason?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be signing Pete Alonso because, if you got Roman Anthony and Pete Alonso in your lineup, Pete Alonso is just a threat regardless of who they're facing. And as you said, especially with the monster and having that as a righty, and he's always putting up big home run numbers. Seems like he's always swinging for the fences most of the time. And as we said, first base has been one of our biggest issues. So
yeah,
that would definitely be my top pick.
Yeah, they need power. They need power. I would like to see them add that this offseason. Schwarber would be awesome. That would be my pick, but I just expect them not to go out and get him. And I'm also a fan of Yoshida. I know he doesn't have the same power as those 2 guys you mentioned, Schwarber and Alonso, but there is some value to a guy that can get on base and obviously hit for contact. We'll see what happens with the Sox there. One last thing I want to mention with baseball before we transition to talking about the Celtics for a few minutes is with this MLB playoffs, obviously being underway, and now we're in the ALCS and the NLCS, which 2 teams do you see coming out of each side? You got the Mariners up 2-0 in the AL over the Blue Jays, and you got the Dodgers up 1-0 over the Brewers on the NL side. But who do you want to come out of each side, or who do you see coming out of each side?
I would like to see the Brewers versus Mariners, but I believe it's going to be Dodgers and Mariners because I think the Mariners, it's kind of crazy. They literally just came off a 15-inning game the other night with basically used all of their pitchers, and then they just fly right into Toronto, which is a long flight, obviously, from Seattle to Toronto. And you got just amazing pitching staff. And I think you got Cal Raleigh, obviously, with the season that he's had is unreal. And then Jorge Polanco actually has really been the one that's really stepped up. Obviously, I don't think most people were expecting this type of postseason from him. And then you got Julio Rodriguez. And the part that's been most impressive to me is they don't even have Brian Wu, who is a potential Cy Young, or what was a potential Cy Young probably before he got injured. But, I mean, yeah, that's been the most impressive to me.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there with those guys. And they've had a lot of guys step up. And Polanco is kind of like what the Red Sox had Steve Pearce when they won in 2018, a guy that was probably, past his better years. Like Polanco was probably better 2 or 3 years ago in Minnesota than he was this year. But just like Steve Pearce was probably better in his 2 or 3 years before playing for the Red Sox. And then he was, a big-time piece and a big-time player in that postseason run for the Sox in 2018. I think with Polanco right now, there was a stat yesterday, 6 of his 7 hits at one point in the postseason were runs driven in on. So he had RBIs on 6 of his 7 hits, which is crazy. That just being able to create that offense on a guy that is their 4-hitter but wasn't one of their main hitters, right? You look at that lineup, Josh Naylor gets more talk, heading into the postseason. Cal Raleigh, Julio Rodriguez, even Randy Arozarena, Eugenio Suarez, they have bigger names in that lineup, especially power hitting wise and clutch hitting wise. Guys are going to drive in more runs than Polanco. But Polanco's kind of been that main bat in their lineup, and it's crazy to see. But that's what October baseball is all about. You're going to have guys that step up because you just really need to be great for a 10, 15, 20-game stretch, and you could be a legend forever, right? Just like Steve Pearce was here in Boston,
Absolutely. And I think on the NL side, I think last night we saw, I think it seems like the Dodgers are just going to repeat with the way, last night they didn't even really hit like that, but when you got a guy like Blake Snell throwing 8 innings, he's just been untouchable, basically. 8 innings, no runs. I think he maybe had 1 or 2 hits total. And then we got Roki Sasaki, who comes in and finishes the deal. I mean, obviously he didn't finish the game, but they still got the job done.
Yeah, he got a couple outs, Sasaki. He was just trying to get that third out. That was tough, but he set them up, getting the 2 outs, and could have set them up to lose if things got bad when Trinan came in, but Trinan got the third out. So he set them up to obviously get the game kind of completed and get the W, but obviously a scare, but that's what playoff baseball is all about, right? But Sasaki's been really good for the most part in the playoffs for them, especially coming back from injury as a starter, to be able to contribute, especially in a chance where they can maybe win the World Series, to have that, effect on a team when you were in the middle of the season in July and August, you were playing in, the spring complex, the Florida Spring Complex League, if I remember right. Wasn't really even on the radar of being a potential playoff contributor, but now you see that he could be that guy as, maybe the bullpen piece heading into, maybe the World Series if things do work out. But we'll see how things work out. I think it'll be Mariners and Dodgers. That was my prediction before the playoffs began, and I think I'm going to stick with that. I think the Blue Jays were a good story, but their bats have just gone cold. The Mariners pitching staff's been really good for the most part. They'll probably hit at some point, the Blue Jays. I don't expect them to go down 4-0, but they'll probably hit at some point, maybe steal a game here or there. But the Mariners have looked really good. And like you said with the Dodgers, they just find ways to win. Even in games where they're not hitting well, Blake Snell can go 8 shutout innings, and that can put them in a position to win. And now they have Yamamoto tonight, Ohtani game 3, and then maybe Glasnow game 4. It's just a ridiculous rotation they have of talent,
I think when you're only scoring 2 runs and you're winning on the road in game 1, I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to hold the Dodgers to 2 runs every game. I mean,
you're right.
With the amount of power that they have.
You're right. It's a great point. It's just like we talked about with the Bruins playing the Panthers and some of those other teams. In order to win those games, the Brewers are probably going to have to win low-scoring games. They're probably going to have to win 2-1, 3-2 games. Just like the Bruins in the games against the Panthers and the Avalanche, they're going to have to win those low-scoring games because they're not going to outscore that team 7-6. Just like the Brewers aren't going to beat the Dodgers probably 10-9 or 10-8. They're going to need to win those low-scoring, gritty games. We'll see how things work out there for the rest. I want to transition out to the Celtics before we close, just so we touch on every Boston sports team. Let's talk about the C's. I know expectations are a little bit lower this year with Jayson Tatum being out, and they lost a lot of pieces. Al Horford, Luke Cornett, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday. They did add some pieces like Anthony Simons and Chris Boucher, I think is going to be a good contributor for them. But it's obviously not the same team heading into this year. What are your expectations for this Celtics team heading into the 25-26 season?
Yeah, as you said, I mean, I don't think it's obviously going to be as pretty as the past 2 years with obviously your top player in Jayson Tatum. It's not going to be there most of the year. But I think that they'll still be in the playoffs with the way that the Eastern Conference is. I mean, I think we can both agree most of the power is in the Western Conference. And it's all those teams are going to kind of beat up on each other by the end. And the Eastern Conference seems like there are only like a few teams that you really see as a threat every single year. Where I think the Bucks are definitely a team that's going to take a big turn with Miles Turner coming in and Giannis together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, the Pacers are going through the same thing. They just made the finals last year, and now Tyrese Halliburton's going to be out most of the year. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, Jaylen Brown's still one of probably top 5, if not top 10 players in the league. And the guy just won the Eastern Conference and Finals MVP last year. So
Yeah, I think you made a great point. The East is definitely weaker than the West, so I think that helps open things up for the Celtics. I think people are down on them. Like, I see people predicting them to miss the playoffs or be a play-in team. I think the Celtics team, realistically, I think they're a 6 seed, 5 or 6 seed. And if you look at the East last year, just like the West, the last few seeds to get into the playoffs, they were all pretty close. Like in the East last year, the 7 through 10 seeds were kind of all a couple games apart, if I remember right. And then the West, the 3 through 8 were all within or 3 through 10 were all within 2, 3, 4, 5 games of each other. So they're all going to be within range. I think the Celtics team probably falls around the 6th seed, but I think they're a playoff team. I think when you look at Jaylen Brown, you get Derek White. You still have a good bench piece in Sam Hauser. Whether or not he starts, who knows? But you have a good bench piece in him, and Peyton Pritchard might start. We'll see where the lineup shakes out. Anthony Simons is a good scorer. Even if he's starting or he's off the bench, he can give you 15 to 20 a night, which is really good. And he's going to get shot opportunities, especially with Tatum being out. He's going to get looks. I think the one thing with the Celtics is worrying about down low. Nemish Keita is going to be that starting center probably, but I think Boucher works his way into being a starter. I think he's better than being off the bench. When you look at this roster, I think in Toronto, they had Jakob Poeltl ahead of him. They had Siakam at one point ahead of him, so it made sense for him to be off the bench. With this Celtics team, though, I think he could potentially be a starter at some point. I think he'll start the year as a backup, but I think he's going to work his way into being a starter. Of those guys the Celtics brought in, Simons, Boucher, they brought Josh Minot in, and I think Luka Garza as well. Of those 4 guys, who are you most excited to see in a Celtics uniform?
Probably Boucher, to be honest, because as you said, that's really where we struggle the most is having a big. And I don't think really Keita is really quick enough to really get up and down the floor, it seems like, every play. Where I think, yeah, as you said, Boucher kind of has that experience in Toronto, just being with so many big guys around him and knowing how to play that style. And Anthony Simons, obviously, is a great player, but at the same time, I feel like we already have so many shooters and so many guards where he'll definitely fit into our identity. But yeah, I definitely am looking more for Chris Boucher because that's kind of our issue is the bigs.
Yeah, and he fits right into Missoula's offense, right? Missoula wants guys that can shoot threes. We saw him last night hit a couple threes for the Celtics. He looked impressive. Even though or was it Sunday? I can't remember. I was watching the Celtics preseason. I think it was Sunday. I was watching their preseason game, and he looks really good in that. Hit a couple big threes. And that's what this Celtics team probably needs is not only a guy that can shoot. They already have enough guys that can shoot, but having a big man that can shoot because Keita's not going to be, lighting it up from threes. He's probably not going to take any threes, So having a guy that can space the floor like Horford did, like Porzingis did, is important. Of their losses, Porzingis, Holiday, Kornet, and Horford, which one of those 4 do you think is the toughest to lose?
Ooh.
I'm going to go Horford because even though Porzingis is a more talented player and Holiday is a very reliable player as well, and Porzingis and Holiday more talented than Horford and Kornet, I think Horford just having a guy, and this is Horford I'm not even that big of a fan of necessarily because I think he's a good player, but I think he's past his prime, obviously, and I think everybody knows he's probably going to play a year or so in Golden State. Having a guy that can be in your lineup game in and game out, can shoot a little bit off the bench, can be a starter, can be a backup, can cover the 5, can cover the 3, that's really important. I'd say Horford's going to be the biggest loss of those guys, truly. Who would you say?
Yeah, I'd probably go with Holiday because I think Holiday's kind of that guy. It seemed like when things got shaky within the game, he'd always just step up with a big 3 or big defensive play or whatever it was. It seems like he kind of had that championship experience from the Bucks a few years ago that kind of got the team under wing where it was a little more calmer, and he's been in the league for a long time. Obviously, the same thing with Horford.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think those big shots kind of just kind of can change the game.
And Holiday's also very reliable with the ball. You can trust him in close games, dribbling the ball up with a minute to go.
Free throws,
exactly. That's something teams struggle with late in games. You lose ball games by turning the ball over in the last 2 minutes, just like missing free throws in the last 2 minutes. It's really important to take care of the ball and shoot well from the line. And that's what Holiday did. He was reliable. I just thought, the contract and where they were at heading into this year, it made sense to move him. And same thing with Porzingis and letting Horford walk made sense. And obviously he was going to go and try to contend on a team that could potentially win this year. And I think he saw this Celtics team as probably another year away waiting for Tatum to get back. And even if Tatum gets back in April, it's going to be tough to rely on him and say, hey, give us 35 a night and carry us through the playoffs. So the way things stand right now, I think Tatum waits things out. I don't think he comes back at the end of the season because it's going to be tough to say to him, hey, give me 35 a night when we get to the playoffs. I think they're just going to let him sit and get ready for next year. What do you think? The way things stand right now, it's October 14th, so it's still a ways away from the playoffs. But where do you think Tatum falls? Do you think he ends up coming back at the end of the season, or do you think he waits till next year?
Yeah, I think it really depends where they are come whenever it is, April or May. Mm-hmm. But yeah, most likely probably just wait him into next year because even when he does come back, it's like you still need usually a month or so to really see where they're at, see and if it's the playoffs too, it's they're going to be going full force first week or whatever, first month back from an ACL tear. I don't know. It seems risky. So, yeah, I'd probably wait him out for a whole year.
Yeah, I'd wait it out, especially with leg injuries. It's just tough to come back, especially when you look at where this team is. They're still, probably still building, just waiting for next year. If he was back and he was healthy, it would make sense this team would be, a finals contender, right? But when he's going to be out for most of the year, I just think it makes sense to let him progress, obviously do his rehab, see where the team's at. But if I'm making the decision and the Celtics are a 500 team in April, I'd probably just let him sit and wait things out. And that's going to be a decision for him and obviously his future and Missoula and his agent. They'll probably all have a take in it. And I know fans will want him back, but I think it's just tough to try to rush him back and say, hey, because if he is playing, they're going to probably try to rely on him. Just when Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were hurt in the playoffs, right, the last few years with the Clippers, we were still asking them, hey, we need 35 a night when you get back and 30 a night when you get back. And it's just tough to ask that when a guy's missed, most of, if not all of the regular season. It's going to be tough to ask that. But we'll see how things play out. Anything else you want to add with the Celtics before we close?
I think that's all set.
I love it. And I want to ask you one more question, actually, before we close. And I appreciate all your time here. It was an hour and 26 minutes. We got a great episode in. And last episode was awesome, but I think this one was even a level up because we had obviously a lot of back and forth talking each sport and covered a lot of teams, a ton of teams we talked about today. But one last thing I want to mention, not necessarily a team, but it's a league, the MLB. I know you want to be an umpire one day in Major League Baseball. What are your thoughts on the automatic ball and strike system that's going to be implemented, I believe next year it is, in the MLB?
Yeah, I actually like it. Because I think what a lot of people, when they just hear ABS, they think it's just going to be calling balls and strikes for them, which the system is actually the umpires are making the call, and then you can challenge. And I think that'll be good because I think it'll take a lot of heat off of the umpires, where it's usually it's just the umpire's call, and that's how it goes, and then it just turns into a screaming match between either the player and the ump or the coach and the ump, where it's you end up getting nowhere. Where I think with the new system, it's you get 2 challenges. It's if you get them right, you keep them. If you get them wrong, they're gone. And it's now you only have yourselves to blame because if you don't use your challenges effectively or what it may be, it's all on you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There's going to be a strategy to knowing when to use it, in what situation, what type of call, whether or not they have a good chance of winning it, they'll use it, obviously. And if they don't have any left, then, it's on them. It's good. There's going to be a strategy component to it. And there's also, like you said, there's going to be a checks and balances to it where you're taking, and I think it's a good thing, taking a little bit of power away from the umpires, which is taking a little bit of stress off of them, right? Because now if it's a bad call and they say, oh, damn, which I umpire and I know you umpire as well, there are sometimes calls in the outside corner, you're like, oh, I wish I called that a strike, but I didn't. Or vice versa. A call that's a little bit above the zone, you're like, oh, that probably isn't a strike. It's nice that now teams can check on it. It takes a little bit of stress away from them, and there's going to be checks and balances on it. You're taking a little bit of power away, but I think it's also a good thing, a little bit of pressure off of them. And you think this will end up being a good thing, right? It's not going to hurt the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think all of the players have basically said, they still like the human element of it. I think if you ever make it, completely, automated, it's players are going to turn into robots. It's catchers aren't even going to want to frame the ball anymore.
You're
It's
right.
like it takes away all the skills of being what you learn when you're younger.
Yeah, there's a human aspect to the game of baseball. Me and you both played it, and now we both have umpired, and I've coached it. I'm sure you probably coached as well. There's an aspect of the game, a human element that you want to keep in it. And hopefully, with this automatic balls and strikes system, I don't think it's going to take away from it either. I think it's just going to enhance the game and obviously keep things fair and keep things going the right way. So we'll see how things work out. But anyways, Brendan, thank you so much for your time today. It was truly a pleasure having you on, and I would love to have you on again soon. We'll talk some football, Patriots, Celtics, Red Sox, whatever it is. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much again.
Yes, sir. Let's do it again soon.